Hello, it's me, that's right, you guessed it, Patrick, with yet another amazing chapter review from Kory Floyd's classic textbook, Interpersonal Communication, 3rd edition. It's rocking out. I don't know. Okay, this week we're talking about Chapter 10, Interpersonal Communication in Close Relationships. And once more, there's so much to cover, I'm splitting this into two, count them, 2 videos. Behold, video number 1. That's, the video you're watching right now. It's all about communicating in friendships and communicating in romantic relationships. For friendships, I'm going to specifically zoom in on the 5 common characteristics of friendships. Zooming, 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 zooming! Okay, too close. Let's back it up. The first characteristic of friendship is that friendships are, voluntary, meaning that you're not required to be in a friendship. Unlike your coworker relationships, which are usually thrust upon you. Unless you quit, you're stuck with your coworkers or your family. Again, you're kind of stuck with your family. You can, of course, make choices to spend time with them or not, but ultimately, they're not as voluntary as friendships. The second characteristic is that friendships are usually peers. Like that, the thing you tie a boat to, a pier? I'm just kidding. No, of course, when we say peers, we're talking about people that are essentially on the same level as us. That is the same level of status or power. Now, that's usually the case, but not always. Sometimes really high-status people become friends with really low-status people, like me. I would love to meet a rich and powerful person to be friends with. Please, email me, if you're available. Anyway, that kind of thing is the exception, so I guess I'll be waiting for a while. The next characteristic is that friendships are governed by rules. Rules? We don't need no stinking rules. Yeah, we kind of do. But that doesn't mean that every friendship has the exact same rules. Different friendships will form different rules, depending on the people in that friendship. The next characteristic is that friendships vary by sex. Ugh. That's what Floyd says. Quote, by sex, end quote. Ugh. I wish he would use the term gender in spots like this because, again, it's not about your biological sex. It's about your gender, and even gender expression. I'm sure there's not a lot of research done yet on how friendships form between those people who are non-gender conforming or who are transgender. That could be an entirely new piece of research. You should try it out. I won't go into all of the various ways in which gender changes our friendships, but just know that it does. The final characteristic of friendships is that they have a lifespan. Much like relationship formation and dissolution in Chapter 9, we can see that relationships go through stages. I'm not going to ask you to memorize these stages, just know that they do have a lifespan and that they can begin, grow, evolve, and eventually, sometimes, they go away. Sad face. So those are the characteristics of friendship. Now, what about romantic relationships? Ooh la la, let us talk about romance. It is so romantic here. Ooh, let me turn down the lights. Nah, I don't think we need to do that. Alexa, lights on. Alexa. Oh, I forgot I don't have Alexa at work. Only at home. Oh, I miss Alexa. Let me get these lights. Oh. Okay, anyway, let's just jump right in with the characteristics of romantic relationships. First, romantic relationships can vary in exclusivity. Though the general norm for most people is that relationships are monogamous in nature, meaning that the partners are made an exclusive romantic and or sexual commitment to each other, sometimes people engage in non-monogamy. And by sometimes, I mean a lot of the time. There's a bunch of varied research out there, but it does indicate that a lot of people aren't faithful to their romantic and or sexual partners. This is called infidelity or cheating. There's also folks that are involved in a form of ethical non-monogamy. The book doesn't name the most common type of this, which is called polyamory. That is maintaining multiple romantic partners at the same time, but being open about it with everybody. Meanwhile, polygamy is marrying more than one person. Culturally, polygamy has roots in some religious groups. For example, the Mormons were once commonly polygamous, but there was a split in the Church of Latter-day Saints many decades ago, which led the mainstream LDS to stop practicing polygamy, while offshoots of the LDS continue practicing it to this day. Next, romantic relationships can vary in whether they're voluntary or not. The norm for Western culture is that they are voluntary. However, in some cultures, marriages are indeed arranged. And in many cases, even when the marriage isn't arranged, a lot of people stay in relationships much longer than they want to, either for financial reasons or because they want to provide stability for their children. I mean, you've heard that term, staying together for the kids. Well, that still happens a lot. Another characteristic of romantic relationships is love. I love love. Don't you love love? I mean, who doesn't love love? All we need is love. Love is all we need. Love lifts us up where we belong. And so forth and so on and yada, yada, yada. But for serious, in most of Western culture, we get married for love. Oh, there are some variations on this, much like some cultures have arranged marriages. Some cultures don't necessarily indicate that love is necessary for marriage. This can be hard for people from Western cultures to understand, but it's something worth thinking about, so we can be more accepting of all the various ways of being in the world. The next characteristic of romantic relationships is all about sexuality, or sexual orientation, as I, and a lot of other people like to call it. It turns out that people form romantic relationships regardless of their sexual orientation. What? I know this probably sounds obvious to you, but about 30 years ago, gay and lesbian groups had to fight hard to convince people that their relationships weren't just about sex, that indeed they were about love and commitment and having children and arguing about the dishes, all the stuff regular couples do. Unfortunately, in many parts of the world, gay marriage is still illegal, which is kind of sad because, gay people just want to get married like anybody else, right? Finally, romantic relationships are often thought to be formed to be permanent. This is interesting. As a culture, we seem to place a lot of emphasis on trying to find our forever person, and we consider anything less than a forever relationship to be a failure. Noted relationship and sex columnist Dan Savage points out that short-term relationships often get a bad rap. That is, if we're not together forever, we must be a failure. But then, that makes almost everybody a failure. Very few people have only had one romantic partner their entire lives, and many people get divorced and remarried, and sometimes remarried, and remarried. So is that so bad? I don't know. I think that if we put so much pressure on a relationship that it is bound to disappoint us. But ultimately, we all get to decide for ourselves how long our relationships last. I like that. Okay, that's it, folks. I am done with this video. That's all I'm covering in the first half of this chapter. But what about families? Oh, I'm glad you asked, Larry. Come back to the next video, and we'll talk about it. Until then, have a great day.